Return everything by noon. That's what they said. Not a hello, not a thank you for 15 years of service. Just a folder, a deadline, and 3 pairs of dead eyes from HR like they were reading me my own obituary. The name's Mike Patterson, 52 years old, and I thought I'd seen everything in my years climbing the corporate ladder. Married for 23 years to Sarah, father to Emma, who's starting her junior year at Northwestern. Tuition runs about $58,000 a year, in case you're wondering. Yeah, timing couldn't be worse. I knew something was off the moment the Outlook calendar pinged for an urgent meeting at 10 o'clock a.m. No agenda, no context, just the sterile subject line. Transition conversation. That's corporate speak for we're about to gut your career with a letterhead. My coffee was still hot when I walked into that conference room. 15 years of 6 a.m. starts, weekend calls, and missed family dinners, all leading to this beige box with fluorescent lighting that made everyone look like they had the flu. By 10:01, I was sitting across from Patricia from HR, she of the emotionless cardigan collection, while some guy from legal hovered like a coat rack, trying not to make eye contact. And then there was Brad Morrison, my new regional VP, a walking cologne advertisement with a white smile and a talent for stealing credit like it was an Olympic sport. Brad leaned against the wall like he was auditioning for a villain role in a corporate training video. Didn't say a word, just watched with that smug expression I'd grown to hate over the past 6 months. The same look he wore when he took credit for the Henderson account I'd nursed for 8 months, or when he forgot to invite me to the quarterly planning session. The HR drone cleared her throat and delivered the blow. Mike, you're being transitioned out of Pinnacle Enterprises effective immediately. Please return your laptop, access badge, and company property by noon today. No mention of my 15 years with the company. No mention of the fact I built the entire Westlake satellite office from a literal dirt lot into one of their top-performing regions. No mention that I generated over $12 million in revenue last year alone, just by noon. It was 10:06. I didn't flinch. My old Army training kicked in. Stay calm, assess the situation, plan your next move. Didn't ask why because, let's be honest, I already knew. You don't get blindsided like this unless there's some greasy politics involved. And Brad had been circling me like a vulture with an MBA ever since he got parachuted in from corporate 6 months ago. My wins suddenly became team efforts. My staff slowly reassigned to optimize workflow. My calendar chopped up like a Thanksgiving turkey, with quick sync meetings that somehow never included me. Classic corporate warfare, and I'd seen it before during my 8 years in the military. Different uniform, same tactics. I just looked up and said, understood. No sarcasm, no tremor in my voice, just steel. The same tone I used to brief colonels back in my Army days. And that's when Brad finally smirked, like he expected me to cry or plead or scream about the injustice of it all. That smirk said gotcha. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that he wasn't even holding the right deck of cards. They shut off my email before I even stood up. 1 second I was Mike Patterson, Senior Regional Director for Pinnacle Enterprises, overseer of 7 expansion zones, closer of 31 commercial leases, and mentor to half the rising talent in the Southwest Division. The next second, I was just another guy with a cardboard box and a suddenly uncertain future. I walked back to my office and heard the lock click behind me like I was in some kind of countdown sequence. My team's Slack went dark. My work phone rebooted mid-scroll. I had 143 unread emails and suddenly none of them were mine anymore. Patricia hovered outside like I might make a break for it with the copy machine. Inside, I moved slowly, deliberately. Let them watch. Let them think they'd won. But I had one last drawer, bottom right, locked. Only I had the key, and no one ever asked what I kept there. The photo of Emma at her high school graduation went into the box first. Then my world's okayest dad mug, a Father's Day gift that always made me smile. My desk plant, a stubborn little succulent that somehow survived the corporate environment longer than most employees. Then I reached for the drawer. I slid it open and pulled out a slim leather folder. Black, no labels, no logos. I paused for a half second, thinking about Sarah's reaction when I told her tonight. Thinking about Emma's tuition bill sitting on my desk at home. Thinking about the mortgage on our house in the suburbs, the one we'd finally paid down to where we could see daylight. Then I tucked the folder inside my jacket pocket. That folder was my insurance policy, though they had no idea what kind of coverage it provided. Brad passed by the glass wall, slowing just enough to check if I was falling apart. I wasn't. Hell, I was almost smiling. The bastard tilted his head like he was surprised I hadn't started throwing staplers. I gave him a nod, not the polite kind. The kind that says, I know something you don't. Because inside that folder was something worth more than my severance package. Something worth more than Brad's entire annual salary. Something that would turn their corporate victory into the most expensive mistake they'd ever made. But they'd have to wait until tomorrow to find out what it was. My assistant, Kelly, peeked in around 11:30. Poor kid looked like she just found out Santa was running a pyramid scheme. She'd been with me for 3 years, straight out of college, and I'd taught her everything about regional operations. Now she was probably wondering if she'd be next. "You okay, Mr. Patterson?" she whispered, glancing nervously at Patricia, who was still lurking outside like a corporate vulture. I nodded, continuing to pack, methodically. "Yeah, I'll be just fine, Kelly. Don't worry about me." "But what about the Westlake Quarterly Review next week? And the Henderson renewal? I don't understand how they can just—" "Kelly." I looked up, gave her the kind of steady look I used to give young soldiers who were panicking under pressure. Sometimes the best thing you can do is document everything and keep your head down. You're good at your job. Don't let this shake your confidence. She nodded, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. In a company like Pinnacle, loyalty was a one-way street, and she was learning that lesson in real time. At exactly 11:58 a.m., I handed over my badge, my laptop, and the company car keys to Patricia. I signed the exit paperwork without reading it, a move that would have made my old Army legal officer cringe, but I had bigger battles to fight. Patricia looked almost disappointed I didn't cause a scene. "We appreciate your professionalism during this transition," she said with all the warmth of a funeral director. I almost laughed. If only they knew what was coming. By 12:01, my credentials were wiped from every system. My name disappeared from the building directory like I'd never existed. The man who'd overseen Pinnacle's southern expansion, who'd mentored a dozen junior executives, who'd saved their asses more times than I could count, was officially erased. But I didn't leave empty-handed. The drive home gave me time to think. Sarah would be at her book club until 4 p.m. Perfect timing to figure out how to break the news. Emma was back at Northwestern, probably cramming for midterms, blissfully unaware that Dad's steady paycheck had just evaporated. I'd been making $148,000 a year plus bonuses. Good money, but not set for life money. Not with Emma's tuition, our mortgage, and Sarah's mom in that assisted living facility that costs more per month than most people's rent. The severance package would cover maybe 6 months if we were careful. But that folder in my jacket, that was a different story entirely. See, 3 years ago, the Westlake site was nothing but a swampy parking lot with a billboard advertising a coming-soon yogurt shop and about a dozen feral cats living under a rusted hot dog cart. The city had big plans for the area, but nobody wanted to be the first to take the risk. Pinnacle needed a regional hub, fast. Our Dallas lease was expiring, client demands were growing, and corporate was breathing down our necks about expansion metrics. The board wanted results, but legal was playing their usual game of bureaucratic ping-pong with every document. I'd found the Westlake property during one of my weekend scouting trips. 22,000 square feet of prime commercial space, perfect location, reasonable lease terms. The developer, a guy named Chuck Rodriguez, was straight shooter. No nonsense, no games. But he had one requirement: signed lease agreement by Friday, or he was moving on to the next prospect. It was Tuesday when he called, with the ultimatum. Corporate legal was knee-deep in their usual review process. Need compliance assessment, waiting on environmental impact study. Still reviewing subsection 4C, paragraph 12, the kind of methodical foot-dragging that would have gotten people court-martialed in the Army. So I did what any good soldier does when the mission is at risk. I improvised. I drove straight to my accountant's office. Tom Rodriguez had been handling my taxes for 8 years. Solid guy who understood business structures. "I need to set up an LLC," I told him. "Today." 2 hours later, Gateway Holdings LLC was officially registered with the state of Texas. Single-member entity, business address at Tom's office, all the paperwork filed and approved. Cost me $300 in filing fees and felt like the smartest money I'd ever spent. Thursday morning, I met Chuck at the property. signed the lease on behalf of Gateway Holdings, put down the security deposit from my personal account, $34,500 that cleaned out most of my savings, and shook hands on a deal that would save Pinnacle's expansion timeline. I wasn't trying to be sneaky. I wasn't building some shadow empire. I was solving a problem that legal would have taken 6 months to approve, while our competitors were circling like sharks and our board was asking uncomfortable questions about regional growth. The plan was simple. Get the lease signed, get operations running, then transfer everything to Pinnacle once legal caught up. Standard business practice, really. Happens all the time in fast-moving industries. And you know what? It worked perfectly. The build-out started on schedule. Infrastructure went in without a hitch. By the end of Q2, we had a fully operational regional hub that exceeded every performance metric corporate had set. Everyone applauded. I got a crystal paperweight and a bonus. Brad Morrison, still a junior manager at the time, got promoted for strategic deal acceleration, which is hilarious considering he was on vacation in the Bahamas when I was negotiating with Chuck. After operations launched, I handed off internal control to facilities and IT. The building was running smoothly, profits were flowing, and everyone was happy. But here's the thing. I never went back and fully reassigned the lease ownership from Gateway Holdings to Pinnacle. Not because I was planning some elaborate scheme. Hell, I wasn't even thinking about it most days. I just had bigger fires to fight, and no one seemed to care about paperwork as long as the numbers looked good. The irony is, I tried to fix it. When Brad first slithered into the regional director role 6 months ago, I sent him a detailed memo. Subject line, outstanding documentation, site lease assignment, 3 pages explaining the LLC structure, the lease chain, the need for proper legal transfer. You know what I got back? Radio silence. Not even a thanks. I'll look into it. Brad was too busy networking his way up the corporate ladder and taking credit for deals he had nothing to do with. Reading documentation wasn't sexy, and Brad only paid attention to things that looked good on his LinkedIn profile. I followed up twice. Email number 2 got a one-line response. Looks good. Will handle. Email number 3 never got a reply at all. By then, Brad was already starting his campaign to push me out. Probably figured the lease thing would sort itself out eventually. So the folder I carried out of that building contained the original lease agreement. Still active, still under Gateway Holdings. Still mine. It hit me around 2 a.m., sitting in my home office with the documents spread across my desk and a glass of bourbon I probably shouldn't have been drinking on an empty stomach. Sarah was asleep upstairs, probably dreaming about book club discussions and weekend plans that just got a lot more complicated. All the signatures, the clauses, the fine print, the renewal options. It was all there in black and white. The building wasn't just my old workplace. It was a house of cards, and I was holding all the foundation pieces. They'd fired me, but they forgot to evict me. The next morning started early. Not by choice. Old military habits die hard, and stress has a way of making 5 a.m. feel like a reasonable wake-up time. I made coffee, sat in my kitchen, and started really reading that lease agreement for the first time in 3 years. 22,000 square feet at $28,400 per month. Early termination clause requiring 6-month penalty payment plus 22% administrative fee. All vendor contracts, HVAC, security, janitorial, IT infrastructure, routed through Gateway Holdings. And here's the kicker. Naming rights and signage agreements all filed under my LLC, not Pinnacle. My phone buzzed at 7:15 a.m., Virginia area code, corporate headquarters. I stared at it for a moment, took a sip of coffee, and let it go to voicemail. If it was important, they'd call back. They did. 2 minutes later, same number. Mike Patterson. The voice on the other end was shaky, urgent, like someone trying to whisper during a hostage crisis. This is Jeremy Collins, corporate legal. I hope I didn't catch you at a bad time. Jeremy. I'd met him once at a company retreat. Young guy, probably 28, fresh out of law school with student loans bigger than my mortgage. Nice kid, but clearly in over his head. Never a bad time for legal, Jeremy. What can I do for you? Papers rustled in the background. I imagined him sitting in a cubicle that still smelled like new carpet, frantically flipping through lease documents he'd never seen before. We've got a situation, he said, voice dropping even lower. It appears the lease for the Westlake property isn't under the company's name. That's correct, I replied, calm as Sunday morning. Silence stretched like taffy. It's under Gateway Holdings, he continued, probably hoping I'd laugh and say, just kidding. I didn't. That's also correct. Gateway Holdings LLC, established March 15th, 3 years ago. Registered in Texas, operated by yours truly. Another beat of silence. I could practically hear his blood pressure spiking through the phone. And you're the sole member? Sole member, managing partner, leaseholder. Happy to send you the filing documents if that helps. He didn't respond to that, just breathed into the phone like he was holding back a panic attack. Finally, Mr. Patterson, we'd like to understand your intentions. The Westlake hub is critical to operations. There have been some complications this morning. I let that word hang in the air like smoke from a house fire. Complications? Badge access issues, some vendor confusion. Routine stuff, he said way too quickly. Now that was interesting. I pulled up the security company's contact on my phone while Jeremy continued his damage control speech. Well, Jeremy, here's the thing. Gateway Holdings is a private entity, and the lease agreement is, as far as I know, still active and in good standing. If Pinnacle would like to discuss the future of that arrangement, I'm open to conversation. With counsel, of course. A long, low exhale. Of course. We'll be in touch. I hung up and immediately called Chuck Rodriguez at Secure Tech Solutions. Same Chuck who'd been managing building security for 2 years, ever since we'd upgraded the system. Hey, Mike, Chuck answered on the second ring. Funny thing, just got word from the home office to maintain lockdown protocols until further notice. You want to tell me what's going on? I smiled. Just maintaining proper security procedures, Chuck. Building's private property, after all. Roger that, Chuck replied, like I'd asked him to water the plants, not lock a Fortune 500 company out of their own office. Building security is your call, boss. By 8:30, my phone was lighting up like a Christmas tree. Text from Kelly, sent from her personal number. Mr. Patterson, do you know why we can't get into the building? The badge readers aren't working and security won't let anyone in. Oh, sweetheart. Because the security system routes through Gateway Holdings, and I never transferred those credentials to Pinnacle. More messages started flooding in. Panicked emails forwarded to my personal account from people who still had my contact info. Urgent, badge access failure, Westlake site, CC'd to operations, facilities, HR, and Brad, who probably hadn't even finished his morning protein shake. By 9 a.m., they realized the real scope of the problem. No admin access to the server room. No override codes for the HVAC system. No contact information for the coffee vendor, the janitorial service, or the elevator maintenance company. Every single operational contract routed through Gateway Holdings. I spent the morning in my home office, fielding calls from vendors who'd been working with me for years. They knew my voice, trusted my decisions, and had been faithfully sending invoices to my LLC for 3 years running. Hey, Mike, called Tony from Premier HVAC. Got some confused folks at the Westlake building saying they need emergency access to the mechanical room. You want me to walk them through the override sequence? Tony, I'd hold off on that for now. There's some ownership transition happening. Let's wait for proper documentation before we start handing out override codes to random people. You got it, boss. Always better to be safe. Brad showed up at the building around 9:30, according to Kelly's increasingly frantic text updates. Apparently he tried to badge in, failed, tried again, then stood outside making phone calls with the kind of quiet rage usually reserved for airline delays and tax audits. By 10 a.m., facilities had cracked. A message pinged on my secure messaging app, the one I'd set up years ago for sensitive building communications. Derek from facilities. Mike, please tell me there's some kind of mistake here. Are you actually controlling access to this building? I let him stew in that anxiety for a solid 15 minutes before replying. Not controlling, Derek. Just maintaining proper security protocols until ownership gets sorted out. His response was immediate. What do you mean ownership? Pinnacle owns the building. Check the lease documents, Derek. Might want to start with the signature page. At 11:30, corporate legal sent me another email. Jeremy again, but this time with backup. Mr. Patterson, we're experiencing significant operational disruption. Our Westlake team cannot access the building, and several vendor contracts appear to be routed through your entity. We need to resolve this immediately. I responded within minutes. Happy to discuss. Please send a meeting agenda and attendee list. I'll be bringing legal representation. His reply came back fast. 3 o'clock p.m. Today work? We can meet at the downtown Marriott Conference Center. Perfect. Just bring copies of all the lease documentation. We'll want to review everything together. The meeting was exactly what you'd expect. Conference room that smelled like industrial carpet and desperation. Jeremy brought 2 senior partners from corporate legal, plus some executive I didn't recognize with a Rolex and an attitude. I brought Diana Walsh, a business attorney I'd worked with during my consulting days. Former Army JAG officer, sharp as a razor and about as sympathetic as a drill sergeant. They started with the usual corporate tough guy routine. This is highly irregular. We need immediate access. There could be legal consequences. Diana shut that down fast. Gentlemen, my client holds a valid lease agreement for the Westlake property through Gateway Holdings LLC. All vendor contracts and building access protocols are properly documented and legally binding. If Pinnacle Enterprises wishes to acquire those rights, we're open to negotiation. The Rolex guy, turned out to be Brad's boss from regional management, tried a different approach. Mike, we've all worked together for years. Let's not make this more complicated than it needs to be. What's it going to take to transfer everything over? Wrong question. Diana opened her portfolio and pulled out a detailed breakdown. Full acquisition of Gateway Holdings, including all associated contracts and naming rights. Compensation equivalent to 36 months of Mr. Patterson's annual salary plus performance bonuses. Written acknowledgement of his foundational role in establishing the Westlake operation. And a consulting retainer for transition support. I watched their faces as they did the math. $148,000 times 3, plus bonuses, plus penalties. We were talking about $890,000 minimum. Jeremy started. That's the cost of proper documentation, Diana finished. Your company failed to execute a standard lease transfer for 3 years despite multiple written reminders. The current situation is entirely of your own making. They tried to negotiate, of course, offered a lower number, threatened legal action, even suggested we could work something out informally. Diana responded to each attempt with the same professional courtesy she'd probably used to reject plea bargains from drunk sergeants. By Friday afternoon, the wire transfer hit my account. $147,000 after taxes and legal fees. Enough to pay off the mortgage, cover Emma's remaining tuition, and set up a comfortable consulting practice. Sarah cried when I told her. Happy tears, mixed with relief, and maybe a little pride that her old soldier husband had outmaneuvered a room full of corporate lawyers using nothing but proper documentation and patience. The severance letter from Pinnacle arrived the following Monday. Standard corporate language about appreciating my contributions and wishing me well in future endeavors. No mention of Gateway Holdings, no reference to the Westlake situation, just a clean exit that let everyone save face. Emma called that evening from Northwestern. Dad, I heard about your job. Are you okay? More than okay, sweetheart. Turns out sometimes the best revenge is just being thorough with your paperwork. They thought they were firing dead weight. Instead, they gave me the best severance package in corporate history. And the best part? It was all completely legal.